All right, I think we are ready to get started.
There you
All right.
Okay.
So, students, I want you all to welcome. We've got a visitor today from the Office of Study Abroad. And so I just want to say a couple of words before we get started with that. And that is that both of my kids were able to do study abroad. I never did study abroad. My wife never did study abroad. It was not something that was afforded an opportunity for us. And I saw the transformational change that it brought to both of my daughters. My oldest daughter spent several months in China when she was an undergraduate student as part of her study abroad experience. And my younger daughter, who just graduated this past May from here, did a study abroad in Ireland for, what is that, 6 weeks? The Ireland program. And so I want you all to give her your attention and please ask as many questions. I've slotted it for 30 minutes, but if interest is high, we can let it go a little longer than that too. So I'm going to turn it over and let's learn a little bit about study abroad. I'll pass out some stuff while you're chatting with everybody.
Okay, so like Dr. Masterson was saying, I'm from the Office of Study Abroad. We're located right over in the International Building up on the 4th floor. And my name's Katerina Ortega. And I've got a brief little presentation to help introduce you to study abroad and what we have to offer and what might work out for you and your academic plans. So what exactly is study abroad? We like to say it's earning USM credit while traveling and helping to get some financial aid if you do have financial aid to help cover the cost, which makes it more attainable because I know, like it's Dr. Masterson pointed out, he wasn't able to go, but his daughters were able to go, and it's conceivable that y'all can too. We've got programs that fit for almost every classification. So you all are freshmen? Freshmen? Okay. Well, our program, one of our program that allows freshmen to go is the Chateau program, and it is fantastic. It's currently full for this year, but then there's the preceding years. But we've got programs that fit all the way from freshmen all the way up into graduate programs. So there is something there for you. As far as the when, we have programs that leave in the fall semesters, the spring semester, the summer semester, and we also have the internship programs available and exchange programs, so which can go a semester up to a year. So why? Well, I did study abroad, and like Dr. Masterson's daughters, it was a very transformative experience. It really does help to open up your eyes to the world and makes you grow and mature as a person. Experiencing new culture and getting a worldwide perspective is always something important that you can do, and it looks very good on a resume. It definitely jumps out when you're going into the workforce and you need something that sets you apart to be able to put, oh, I studied in such and such country for X amount of time, kind of sets you above the other candidates. Career readiness, well, for the internship programs, we have an internship program in Ireland. That's something else that helps you get an experience in working for, outside of the U.S. workforce, which also gives you more of an edge when it comes to joining the workforce at large. So program types, as I touched upon before, there are several different types of programs. The faculty-led programs are ones that you go in a group and they are led by a faculty member. The Chateau program that I mentioned previously, that is led by Madame Roland, and she takes a group of students over and helps them, travels with them, and is basically their touchstone throughout their stay in France. They actually stay in a castle, so it's pretty cool. A chateau, yeah, in Strasbourg. There are that was a semester faculty-led program, but we also have short-term faculty-led programs. One of which, an example of which, is our summer in Spain program, or Spanish in Spain. It lasts 3 weeks. It's faculty led. This year, Dr. Miles is taking all the students to Cadiz, Spain. So it's on the southern coast of Spain. You could even take a ferry over to Morocco. But it helps to give you an in-depth look at the Spanish culture and the language. We additionally have internship and student teaching. So if you feel like teaching might be something in your future, you can get your student teaching hours abroad. The exchange programs are by far our most independent programs. You will basically switch places and experience 100% life as a student in one of our partner universities. We've got students right now that are doing a program that's over in Kiel University, which is in England. We've got a couple that are over in Birmingham University. And those can be either a year or they could be a semester. Yep. So here are just some examples of our short-term faculty-led programs. So it's not just language. We've got a little bit of everything, like music in Vienna, church and state in Italy if they're into political science. And I don't know if y'all heard me talk with Dr. Masterson. We were conversing before. There is a history of chemistry in London. It's a short little introduction compressed into the history of chemistry, and it will be led by Dr. Hugh Broom this time around. So that might be something, since you're in a chemistry class, maybe later on down the line you'd like to do that. So as I mentioned, the Chateau program in the spring, semester in Spain in the fall. Yep. Our internship and student teaching. Here are some of the partner institutions where you could do an exchange. So even The Hague in the Netherlands, Swansea, Kiel. And the great part about the exchange programs is you pay USM's in-state tuition. So even if you go over to The Hague, you're not paying The Hague's prices. You're paying the prices that you would pay here and being able to use financial aid to help pay for it. So how do we afford this? Well, you can use the financial aid. If you are using financial aid now, you can use that and apply it to help cover the cost of the programs. Another thing that we have as well is access to a lot of different scholarships, like the Gilman Scholarship that helps go towards covering the cost. So there are means by which to help pay for it, so it's not out of reach. So don't let that be the deciding factor in why you don't explore possibly doing this. So, and to wrap up, so thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to stop by our office. Like I said, it's over in the International Building. It is on the 4th floor. Come on in, or just book an appointment. You can book an appointment with me or one of my colleagues, and we can talk more, figure out what your plans are in the future, and how this can work out for you and be beneficial to you in the long term. So, is there anything I can answer or thoughts, concerns?
Yeah, I heard that you said that there was a program for freshmen. What about transfer students?
For transfer students? Yes,
Okay.
indeed, absolutely.
Any scholarships for international students?
For international students, I believe you guys can. That is a very good question. I will have to look into that one because I'm not sure if you are able to get onto the Gilman. So just send me an email or write down your email address. I'll have you write down your email address so you can, and I will email you when I have that answer because I'm not sure if that applies. Do you have a pencil? Yeah. If you'll just write down your email, and I would be happy to get back to you.
Sure.
How many of you would like to go study somewhere else for a little while? Okay, good number of you. Yeah. And there's probably going to be a number of things that you're thinking in your mind right now that might be barriers to that, right? So what are you all thinking might be a barrier to study abroad? Now let's take money off the table, okay? Because that's always one. But what might be some other barriers that you all are thinking about?
Language.
I think I said one.
Language, okay?
Okay.
So is there any,
Well, most all of the programs are taught in English. There are some that do have a language requirement at like X amount of hours in a foreign language, but there are many where the instruction is in English. So you wouldn't have to worry about that. You wouldn't have to worry about that. So I wouldn't let that stop you.
okay, we got another question over here.
For the semester, the Spanish in Spain, can those credits count for like 300 and 400 levels?
Yes, they can.
Yes, sir.
Like how structured would like the short term?
The short term,
Yeah.
generally speaking, what they will do is you'll attend class for about 4 to 5 hours a day, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you have the weekends to yourself. There are excursions that are built in, like I know in Spanish in Spain during the summer program, they're going to do an excursion to some Roman ruins. That's factored into the amount that you pay as well and to the program fee. So you can go on with them to that. You will have more structure, you will have a classroom element, but we like to refer to a lot of the programs as experiential learning. So it's like using a city as the classroom, so you're not spending your entire time in a classroom. There will be some of that, but a lot of it will be getting out there with your instructors.
Any other? Audrey?
So for the internship programs, like what do those look like exactly? Like do you use your scholarships to go over there, or do you get like a small stipend so that you can live in a, so you can buy food and, have a place to stay and stuff?
There are there's your program fees, and that you can use to your student financial aid and scholarships that will help cover, and that is considered a billable amount. Then on the other side, that would be like your personal expenses, so you would have to budget for that in the future. But as far as how the program would work for you, it's very designed to the individual. So what you would do is make an appointment, and Jessica Bunyalis would sit down with you and say, okay, so what's your major? What are you looking for? Let's see which university has the programs or the courses that would fit your needs. So they're more tailored to you, but they are very independent. So once you're there, you are living the life of a student at Hague University.
Okay.
Do we still have the Exeter program?
Exeter.
England?
Yes, that is one of the universities.
Any other things that people are thinking about? Kind of what, so we've talked about language requirements, we've talked a little bit about money, we've talked about some other components. But one of the things that I think you all should be thinking about, if you're thinking at all about doing study abroad, is how is this going to impact my progression to degree, right? So if I take a semester and I go do X, how's that going to impact my degree here at USM, right? Well, these short programs that she was talking about typically happen during intersessions, so there's no
Yes.
impact on your degree. So if you went with Dr. Broom in the future, it's get on a plane on New Year's Day and come back 2 weeks later before class
Exactly.
starts, right? So it's kind of an intense 2-week thing that, there's a little party in there, I think, as well.
I
So
mean,
it's an
you're in
enjoyable-
London, you can
You're
go
in
see
London,
Big
you got
Ben.
to, right? You gotta go see Big Ben and do all those kinds of things. So those aren't gonna really impact your progression to degree, so to speak. The other ones don't have to impact your progression degree, but it requires you to think a little bit ahead. So if you're trying to do a study abroad and you go talk, literally just a few months beforehand, it's less likely that you're going to be able to accommodate everything. So I'm going to encourage you to actually talk to your advisor. Go and talk to the folks in study abroad, as she
Yes.
was talking about. And
Absolutely.
then you can start to work with your advisor on, okay, at this institute, The Hague, wherever,
Yeah.
they've got this class, they will allow me to substitute that for this here. They will work with me on this. I've done that when I was an advisor, back in the day when I was just in the chemistry department, advising students and teaching and doing my research. We had several times, and that's why I brought up Exeter. I remember we had to sit down and go, well, really, they teach analytical chemistry over these courses, and we have it
Yeah.
as this way, we have to,
You have to do a course conversion.
we have to do it, yeah.
So it
and
takes more preparation, but it certainly can be done, and
Oh,
we're
yeah.
happy to work with you.
Yeah.
We had one of our work studies. She just got back from Birmingham, and she is a forensic science major. So it can be made to work.
Absolutely.
So, but I hope you all do. Like on a personal note, I am such a proponent of study abroad. When I was doing an undergrad years ago, I did a French in France program, and now that I've graduated, came back many years later, I'm currently enrolled at USM as a Spanish major, finishing that up, and my plan is to do some graduate courses over in Cadiz. So it doesn't have to be when you're an undergrad, it can be when you're a graduate student, and we can make it happen for you. So just reach out.
So for the Spanish in Spain, is that the program where we'll be housed with residents of the country?
Yes, the semester in Spain, you will have a living with a host family in Cadiz. So
And does that differ for when it's the summer, the Spanish in Spain for the summer?
you're also housed with a host family in both. So are you a Spanish major?
Minor.
A minor? Okay. Es una buena oportunidad para ti. Sí. So,
So I would recommend that if you're thinking about it at all, go see the folks over in Study Abroad. I will count this, if you go visit them, this can count as one of your activity assignments. So I'll count it as activity 2, if you want to do that.
I have already done that. Does that count?
If you've already done it and I told you you can do it, just go get them to sign the form and I'll let that work.
yeah. Or the email I shoot you about. Maybe that will work. I don't know.
So again, I do believe that this program is a transformational opportunity. Many students sometimes are a little nervous about going abroad, and I would highly recommend, if you're in that boat, I'm not asking you to raise your hand, right? But if you are in that boat, one of these short-term faculty-led things is a
Yeah.
great way to get your
Mhm.
toe wet. You're not thrown into a country with a host family that you've never met before. And so, definitely consider it. But what I will say, my experience from these short-term ones that happen in the intersession, they tend to fill up fast.
They do.
So do you have any advice on when students should start trying to register? How does the registration for these work, I guess what
There
I'm
are
trying to say.
applications that are online, so you can go through the program listing and click on the applications, and there'll be a button that says apply now, and it'll also give you the time frame in which the program is, as well as deadlines. Because one thing we do have to factor in as well is if you don't already have a passport, that can take a while. So you can't just decide a month before, hey, I'm gonna go. There are a few more steps that you need to follow. So just check out the programs, and you'll be able to see at what point you can apply if the program is taking applications. And if so, it'll lay out precisely what you need to do in what order to have everything in line and by when.
So just a quick show of hands, how many people are planning on going to visit with them about maybe using this as an activity assignment? Okay, a few of you, so you can expect a few. One already
Cool.
went, so that's good.
Awesome.
And so I'm not trying to pressure anybody into this, but again, I do think it's a very transformational thing. It's not a requirement, obviously. But I do want to just let you all know, after college, doing these types of things gets harder and harder to do.
Yes.
And so you will start to have more and more obligations outside of your own personal identity and self. And so this may be the 4 years that you have an opportunity to kind of go somewhere, experience some things, and expand your horizons a little bit. And even for those of you who have traveled, an opportunity to travel somewhere else and earn credit is a special opportunity. And I can guarantee you that that will never happen again in your life. Because if you travel abroad, as I have from time to time, I don't travel a lot, but when you're traveling on what your job wants you to do, it's you go, you do your job, you come back, because we're not paying for anything else than that, right? So this opportunity to go get credit, have some time on the weekends and whatever to actually kind of backpack and hike and see different things, it's really a great opportunity. So let's thank her for coming and talking to us, and
Thank y'all. Hope to see you.
hopefully that you'll see some soon.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right.
So,
Thank you so much for
get these
coming. I
done.
appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and don't forget those. I gave
Okay.
everybody one. And so.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all. Hope to see you over there.
Absolutely. Well, so the good news is that today I didn't have a whole lot planned otherwise, so this will probably be a fairly quick lecture. But I did want to bring up these two pieces in our reading. So I assigned you all to read phlogiston from the chemistry book. Can anybody tell me what phlogiston is?
Essence of fire.
Pardon?
The essence of fire.
Essence of fire? Okay.
I was gonna say the same thing.
You're gonna say the same thing?
It's like when fire burns, like it's released from it.
Okay, that's right. Was this unreasonable for the time period? I mean, look, the dates are in the 1600s. Did we have an atomic understanding of the world we live in?
No.
We did not, right? And so, how did they come to think about phlogiston? I mean, somebody just didn't say the essence of fire, right? There was an observation that was made there, right? What was that observation?
Seems like they observed it to be kind of potential energy, like the kind we study in chemistry.
Okay,
Like stuff that burned easily had a lot of phlogiston inside of it.
okay, very good. What else?
Decrease in mass.
Decrease in mass, right? You can actually do this experiment. You can weigh a match, you can light that match, you can let it burn out, and you can weigh it again. Is it gonna weigh more or less? It's gonna weigh less. Something is no longer there, and it seemed like it magically went away, right? And that, for them, was phlogiston, right? It was on fire. Fire obviously looked like it was leaving, right? What is fire? Something we all experience. Do we really know what it is?
Element. Not the element of the
But it's one of the ancient elements, right? Earth, wind, water, fire, right? Okay, it is certainly, it was considered to be elemental. We know that's not true now, right? What's fire?
Is it plasma?
Is it a plasma? That's a good question. I don't know that it actually is yeah, it probably has some ionized gases in it, yeah. Okay, we'll go with that. What is the vast majority of fire?
Heat.
Okay, there's definitely heat. There's heat energy. Have you ever touched fire? I'm not actually, by the way, I'm not telling you to go touch it. But do you feel it other than the heat? Does it feel like there's really something there? You sure? I've run my finger through fire before. It feels like a mass. I feel a resistance. What is that resistance?
oxygen.
There is oxygen that's associated with fire, but most of it's carbon dioxide and water vapor. When we think about things burning, right, most of the things that we think of as burning are hydrocarbons, and hydrocarbons we know burn to release heat energy plus carbon dioxide and water, right? So really phlogiston was the loss of carbon dioxide and water. Well, carbon dioxide has mass, water has mass. So it makes sense that we would see the loss of mass. They just didn't fully understand it, right? So the phlogiston theory survived for a while, right? Were they using the scientific method when they come up with phlogiston? Parts of it, weren't they? They were using parts of they had made an observation that there was let's just say it's a piece of wood that burned and less of it was there when it was done, right? So that must be the phlogiston, right? So yeah, phlogiston is definitely a part of our history. What do we know today? We know that phlogiston is absolutely nonsense. But does that mean that what they were doing was incorrect? No, they were learning, right? That this body of knowledge that they had acquired. And then somebody came along and said, this doesn't make any sense. And today we have what? What do we have in place of phlogiston? Huh? Don't say it, please.
Combustion.
Combustion, we know that as combustion. We know the science of combustion. We know that nowhere in that equation is carbon dioxide plus water plus heat plus phlogiston, right? We know that that's not the case, right? We've replaced this with new theories, right? This is how science works. This is a very ancient example of that, right? Nobody teaches you about phlogiston anymore. At least I hope they don't teach you too much other than me talking about it right now. But this was kind of some of the early scientific attempts to understand the matter and the changes it undergoes. That's what chemistry is, right? So phlogiston was some of the early real attempts to try to understand chemical processes. We just didn't talk about them in that way. The next thing that I wanted you to read was polywater. Not polywogs, polywater. Okay? So I asked you to read polywater. This is a little more modern. I happen to have been alive during this period of time. Not the 1920 part, but the 1979 part. So I was born in 72. I would have been around when people were still talking about polywater. And it starts off, the polywater story is a strange one. What was strange about it?
The water was unnatural, like, it wasn't quite right.
Wasn't quite right. Okay, that's a good place to start. They were noticing
It was like more thicker, wasn't it?
a little thicker, a little more viscous, behaved differently than regular water, right? Was this a glass of water?
Little, what was it, ampules?
Little capillary tubes. So they noticed that when you put water in little tiny capillary tubes, that it seemed to have this different property. Maybe it was a little more viscous, a little thicker. Boiling point seemed to maybe be a little different, right? Maybe the melting point seemed to be a little different. There's something strange going on with this water. What do we mean by polywater? What does poly mean when you add it to when you put it in front of something?
Many.
Many, yeah. So you think of,
It's the same thing.
yeah, repeat units of the same thing, right? We are in the political season, the elections, right? Politics means multiple bloodsuckers, right? All together. Joking, right? But you think about polymers, that's a repeat unit. So if we think about polywater, we're thinking about water being the repeat unit in multiple versions. Is polywater a crazy idea? It's not crazy. Why is it not crazy? What do we know about water? What does water like to do?
Stick together.
Likes to stick together. Does anybody know what we call that?
Hygroscopic.
Okay, we got hygroscopic, we got adhesion, right? You're using some of the right terms. Has anybody heard of the term hydrogen bonding yet?
Yeah.
Right, we know that water, because it has an oxygen and a hydrogen, it likes to hydrogen bond, which is really an intermolecular force. It's particularly strong. And so you can imagine, right, a water molecule hydrogen bonding with another water molecule and so on. And you can imagine that being really big. In theory, in your mind, you can imagine that getting so big that you have polywater. And maybe it would behave drastically different. And that's not so bad, because if we think about water, what's the formula for water? H2O, right? Water weighs what on the periodic table? 16, very good. What does hydrogen weigh? 1. So water on a molar basis weighs 18 grams. Do you know what water theoretically should be on Earth right now, because it has a mass of 18 grams per mole? It should be a gas. But thank goodness is this thing called hydrogen bonding, which makes it bond to each other and makes it act as if it's heavier. And so what is the boiling point of water? 100 degrees Celsius, what's the melting point of water? 0 degrees Celsius, right? So we've got a 100 degrees Celsius range to where we can have liquid water. Thank goodness. Because we can live in South Mississippi where the temperature is higher than in the north. We can live all over the globe, except maybe the extremes fairly easily, because water will remain liquid under these conditions. And so it's not unreasonable to think from that, hey, maybe under certain conditions, water does really form this massive polymer and starts to behave very differently, right? And they published on this. They went to scientific societies and talked about this. What's the problem? What was the problem?
The result was not consistent.
The results could not be reproduced. One of the things that we scientists tend to be sticklers about is that the results must be reproducible. There's always a little variation, depends on how the measurement is made, but we insist that one day nature just doesn't change its mind and behave differently, right? Kind of the dogma of science. We fundamentally believe that the laws of nature today will be the laws of nature tomorrow, and yet when Audrey went in and ran her polywater experiment, she did not find the same results I found in my polywater experiment, or your polywater experiment. What is this all demonstrating?
Scientific method is very important for actually being able to prove something is true or not.
That's right. It is the way in which we discover whether or not something is true. Both of these cases, there was rational arguments that could be made for the observations that were seen, but it didn't account for everything. And people thought about it more. What were some of the fears of polywater? Got out of the capillary tube and polymerized all the water in the world, life on Earth could just end. Right? Water is kind of an important thing in life. I would say an essential thing. Okay. What else do we know about polywater? What's the likely explanation? Were these observations incorrect? Or was the explanation for the observations incorrect?
Observation.
So you take a capillary of water and you go and you measure its melting and boiling point. You've observed that. Do you think that's wrong? Or do you think the explanation for that difference is wrong?
Explanation.
Right. So there's no doubt that Audrey's experiment or your experiment or my experiment, the observations are probably correct observations, but the explanation that this is polywater is what's wrong. What did they end up determining was the most likely culprit for these differences in observations? Impurities. And in fact, they showed that these impurities were most likely what?
Sweat.
Human sweat. Well, I'm working with a capillary and it's a hot day and I get a little sweat in my capillary tube. All of a sudden, things behave differently, right? Why would sweat, which is mostly water, behave differently than pure water? It has salt in it. It has salt and it's other things as well, right? But primarily salts. What do we know happens when you add salt to water? What happens to its boiling point? It raises. What happens to the melting point? Decreases. Does that explain some of the observations that they were seeing with polywater? Absolutely. So it's more likely that we had a situation where there was contamination as opposed to a new undocumented phenomenon, right? Again, the power of the scientific method, which is very, very important. Folks, I know for you 1979 seems like an ancient, that's what we would consider, this is modern times. People were making these observations. Does anybody know of any other thing that made the news in the last, 40, 50 years that might be similar to this? Where renowned scientists may have made some sort of claim that they've got a lot of big hoopla over and then ultimately it turns out not to be the case. Yes?
Vaccines causing autism.
Vaccines causing autism. That one is still a controversial one. There's a good number of people across the globe that believe that vaccines cause autism. There is no doubt in my mind that there are people who have adverse reactions to vaccines, but to make a broad claim is probably unwarranted and certainly doesn't bear itself out in the data. Right? I know for a fact, I got my COVID vaccine and I ran a pretty high fever. I had a pretty big reaction to that, right? But that does not mean across the board that vaccines don't work. Okay? Anything else? Anybody ever hear of Pons and Fleischmann? This would have been when I was in high school, so a long time ago. They made a claim of cold fusion. What is cold fusion? What is fusion?
Nuclear reaction.
It's a nuclear reaction where we take two nuclei and fuse them together and make a new one. And what's kind of important about fusion?
It increases the
It
power.
releases energy. But what were you going to say?
Increases the power.
Yeah, so we release energy, right? We get power out of it, right? What works on fusion that we are all aware of?
Hydrogen.
Okay, that's true, but what doesn't? The sun, right? The sun is a fusion reactor, right? We have life on Earth because of fusion. It seems to be infinite energy, right? In a way. It's not really, but it's a lot, right? So imagine if I could, instead of having a big star making energy, I had a little thing in my house that did cold fusion, that took hydrogen atoms and mixed them together and got energy out of it, and I could power my house on something about this big, and the byproduct was simply hydrogen gas or helium gas. Would that not be a great discovery? Yeah. Well, Pons and Fleischmann were actually well-noted electrochemists. They were very well respected in their fields. They observed something that suggested cold fusion. They made a big announcement about it. There was actually a brown bag lunch at the American Chemical Society where they were talking about it, and it turns out to be nothing but bunk. Not that they intentionally misled anybody, but their measurements were wrong. Nobody could reproduce the result. As a result, today we're still burning hydrocarbons. We're not running our cars on cold fusion. Right? Oh, and by the way, it turns out that hydrocarbons are one of the most energy dense things we know. It's more energy dense than lithium, which is the lightest metal that we can make a battery with. Right? So it's always going to be hard to get ourselves off of the hydrocarbon economy. We like energy. What has the most energy per unit of volume right now, other than nuclear? Well, that's nuclear, but it's hydrocarbons. I mean, from a chemical perspective, hydrocarbons have some of the most energy dense stuff that we know of. So, the reason that I had you read about phlogiston was that was ancient times, and polywater, that's relatively modern times, same problems. But science, being self-correcting, was able to address both of those situations. Okay? So, that's all I had to talk about today, so we're going to get done a little early. I'm going to hand out the note card. Okay? Name on one side. On the back, I want you to tell me whether or not you would like to study abroad, and where and why. And oh, by the way, our notebook reflection for this week, given that the due date falls on fall break, will be due on Monday. So I will post it today at some point, but I will not make it due until 6 o'clock on Monday. So nothing is due for this class during fall break. So when you all are done, please turn in your card. I will see you next week. And next week we will have a lot of fun. We are going to do an in-class activity together. And we are going to talk about the Nobel Prize that was just announced today in chemistry.
Protein structure,
Pardon?
protein structure.
On protein structure, that's exactly right. And also artificial intelligence. So that's kind of a neat thing. I'm going to have to read the original paper.
Was that the,
Nobel Prize in Chemistry for artificial intelligence.
It was using artificial intelligence for this protein stuff. Yep. I'm going to have to read up on it myself. It's not my typical area, but we will talk about it next week.
Are they from Princeton?
I don't think so. Google.
And University of Seattle.
In Seattle?
Oh,
University of
the
Washington.
physics one is from Princeton, right?
And from University of